Welcome to the Off Central Podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Larry Kirk. I am joined today by Pastor Jonathan Prothero, our local theologian, also known as NT Wright 2.0. And so it's morphing.
To put in a disclaimer every week, like,
it's morphing. No.
Go read his books and listen to very little of what I have to say. Just know.
We love you. We love you, Pastor Jay. We love you. We love you. We're also joined today by two incredible leadership giants in our community, Pastor Peter Prothero. Welcome, and Pastor Shane Willard. Such incredible people that has really, quite honestly, helped shaped, well, specifically you, because he's your dad.
Peter Prothero shaped
really,
a few things.
but really shaped our lives, over the years when it comes to ministry.
What's up, Dad?
What's up, Pops? We can roll with that, right? Yeah, we can roll with that.
Absolutely.
No, but we're going to talk about Pastor Peter's book that he just brought out, the soft and hard side of leadership. Yeah. And we're gonna chime in when we feel like it's appropriate, but we're gonna let you unpack that a little bit. Just share a little bit with those who are listening with us and even watching on YouTube right now a little bit about that book.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe as you explain it as well as a precursor, also just answer the question why you felt like this book was important. What was it that needed to be written that hasn't been said?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that often what is happening in the world in terms of politics and culture and the way leadership is expressed in the world, there's aspects of church life that tend to copy or at least come into some sense of alignment with that. Maybe not to the same degree, but I notice a tremendous influence going on. And as I looked at it, I looked at my own life and the things I wrestle with, and I looked at what was going on in culture and what I saw going on in the church. And as I traveled around the world, I was beginning to see a polarization taking place, that we were losing what I would call the middle ground, and we were moving to two extremes. It's interesting when God speaks to Joshua, he says, don't let this book of the law depart from your mouth, and it goes on and on, and it says, don't depart to the left or to the right. And I think I've observed leaders who the tagline to my book is how to avoid being a wimp or a megalomaniac, which is the extreme ends of the spectrum. And the wimp is somebody who really, and we see that in politics today, they're more concerned about making expedient decisions. What will keep me in power? What will keep people pleased? What will help me win the next election? Which is very terminal thinking, very short-term thinking. Nobody makes a very difficult decision which will be hurtful for the next 5 years, but long-term be very, very helpful. And so there's this very short-term thinking, and to me that's wimpish leadership. It's not strong leadership. And on the other hand, you go to some cultural contexts, and you've got the kind of megalomaniac behavior, which is the sort of power crazy, the dictator type. And even in your own nation here, you've seen different types of presidents, some more controlling, more directive. And it seems to me like both those extremes are unhelpful for the church fulfilling its destiny and for leaders functioning in a healthy way. And so I looked at that and I asked myself the question, are there some words that I could choose that would capture the essence of what the soft side is, and are there some words I could choose that would capture the essence of what the hard side is? And of course, the danger of doing that is it becomes reductionist. It becomes too reductionist. I recognize that from the word go. But I also thought, well, if I fill out those words, so I don't just leave them as simple definitions, but fill them out in terms of the biblical narrative and stories from Scripture, and then experiences from my own life, then perhaps I can get away with doing that. So with the soft side, I reduced it to 3 words: compassion, contrition, and connection. And all the sermon preachers are going to love this because it's 3 more C's as well for the hard side of leadership, which is courage, conviction, and clarity. And even with those words, I tried to define in what context. So courage, in the face of danger, conviction in the face of countless opinions, clarity in the face of confusion. And so with each word, I was trying to unpack each word and give what I felt was a holistic view of leadership is both soft and it is hard. Jesus is the lamb slain from the foundation of the world, and he's the lion of the tribe of Judah. He's the suffering servant. He is the king who rules with a rod of iron in Revelation. And so it's like, well, if this is Jesus and he is both those things, I then tried to break down, well, when is Jesus soft? When does the compassion, the contrition, the connection, when does that come through? And when is Jesus hard? And it's not difficult to see that as you read the Gospels. And I think particularly within the Western church, we're afraid of the hard side of leadership because we're afraid of being the megalomaniac. We're afraid of going too far. But there is a side where Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." And that's tough words to somebody you've just said you're going to give them the keys of the kingdom and build with them. And there's other times, Matthew 23, "You brood of vipers. Let the dead bury the dead." There are these statements of Jesus, and I wanted to really think deeply about, well, why is Jesus saying that in that way at that time to that person? And that's what the book unpacks.
Wow, that's really. I can't wait to read it. I can't wait. Like, it just got me. I'm like, I get excited about it.
Well, I'm getting great feedback. Bill Johnson gave me some great feedback. He did a little thing for me. Mark Sharona did a forward for me. So it's there's some good guys who feel like it's capturing.
Pastor Peter's
something.
got a lot of insight. So and sometimes he's prophetic. So what am I?
What
am I, sir? What am I, sir?
You have a strong mercy, compassion gift, I would say. The soft side, I'd say you have it in spades, in a good way, not in a wimpish way, in a really, really good way. I'd say that's an absolute strength with you.
True.
It's brilliant, but also, the hard side is I think you're a courageous person. Because I think where you've shown compassion, you have to be courageous often. There has to be that in the face of other people's judgments and evaluation and stuff like that. So, I've got nothing but admiration for you, Pastor Larry. I'm telling you. And
he's just saying that, folks. He's on the podcast.
It's taken me a long time to get to where I am. And I think in the past, as a younger leader, I was always intimidated by people who had big stories that they brought with them into the kingdom. Yeah. And it always intimidated me in the sense, so we had a guy on our team who had been involved in raising 3 people from the dead. And it's like, it was like whenever he said anything, I thought, he must hear better than me. Like God used him to raise the dead on 3 occasions. He just... if he's saying, in fact, why isn't he leading? Maybe he should be doing this. And so I was always second guessing myself and caving in, if you will, to use that language, which is wimpish. It's caving in because I wasn't exercising my gift to the degree I should have been. And I remember when God convicted me, that the sin in the book of Revelation, I'm trying to think where Jezebel was. Which church was that? Your Revelation 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's there.
Thyatira, because it was the labor guilds, and they had the counts for the labor guilds.
It was Thyatira. Yeah. But then when Jesus is speaking to the church, he says, "You allow that woman," and I remember the Holy Spirit speaking to me. He said, "Peter, that's your sin. You allow." You weren't exercising the hard side of leadership. You allow. It went on because you didn't step in. And that requires courage. But courage is not enough, because if you're you can get a mercenary who's courageous, but he lacks conviction. In other words, well, how much are you going to pay me?
Right.
Not what's right and what's wrong here. conviction adds a moral dimension to courage. So I've met people who are courageous people. Sometimes, gangs, the way they function, the way they steal, the way they rob banks, they're doing courageous stuff if you think about it. Some of it is insane, but they don't have conviction. There's no moral center, and conviction brings that. And I just talk about how the way conviction forms in us as we grow up. Proverbs says the first one to present his case seems right until another comes and questions him. And you read an article, let's say you read an article, about climate change, and you read one guy and you think, oh, yeah, right, yeah. And then you read another article and you think, oh, I don't know now. Now I'm really confused. This guy says this. And it's these multiple opinions that we're having to deal with as leaders. And so developing conviction is more than having opinion. It's a process where you really think something through, and it becomes settled in you. And so once it's a conviction, it's like that's the framework you operate out of. And the thing is, in the beginning you hold a conviction, but in the end a conviction holds you.
That's good.
And then the danger then is, well, what if your conviction was based on this information and now we have new information? And in Christian theology, that's happening all the time. Like since the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and, there's a guy I admire called David Instone Brewer, who's a tremendous theologian. He's a Greek scholar, and he was on the team translating the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he came across a first century divorce document. Well, it totally changed his view of divorce and remarriage, and he wrote a book called Divorce and Remarriage in the Church. He wrote one for the common man and one for theologians. And so his conviction changed, but it didn't change easily. It didn't change because somebody said you're wrong. It changed because he was on a journey of continual learning and discovery. So I talk about that in the book. I talk about how convictions do hold us, but at the same time, we've got to be open to more learning and more understanding and stuff like that.
That's so good. So I didn't mean to interrupt your flow there, but while we're on the hard side of leadership, maybe, I don't know about you, but I've noticed a lot, particularly maybe in mega churches, the tendency for leaders is to shift into too hard, I guess. Might be, that's from the outside looking in, so maybe I'm wrong there in the way that I view that. I'll try and soften that a little bit, but that's what it seems anyway. And that's a lot of the reports that are coming out now from people who are coming out of working for those churches and just feeling like they were abused. So I guess the question is, what are some of the pitfalls of just going too hard, and how do you begin to remedy that for some leaders? If you're watching today and a leader's going, there's too much conviction, there's too much courage, I'm running in and I'm a bull in a china shop, and I need to try and soften this. How do you talk to those leaders?
Well, one of the things I do is I ask them, the compassion, the contrition, the connection. One of the things that I did when I studied contrition, Isaiah 66, 1 and 2, verses 1 and 2, heaven is my throne, the earth is my footstool. Where is the place that you built for me? All these things my hand has made, and they exist. It's like God is saying, I'm really not that impressed that you think I'm there in that 10 by 10 thing that's been made. I'm everywhere. But then he says, and to this one will I look, him who's of a contrite spirit, who trembles at my word. And so when I'm with leaders like that, to me, the word contrition is your posture before, it's your humility, but your posture before God. I think that's the way it's mainly used in the Old Testament. And Anselm, the theologian, he said, I would rather experience contrition than try and define it. And so when I'm working with leaders who are very, they're working on this tendency of just being too strong, compassion is all about, how do you feel about the broken people? Can you still remember how that feels? And does that move you? And the thing about the Samaritan is he has a plan, he's on a journey, he has an agenda, and it all changes because he encounters broken humanity. And I think the danger in leadership, and don't get me wrong, when I go to churches, there's always a green room where people can take care of you and stuff like that. But I hate it when I go to some mega churches and the guy, all you ever see is he appears on stage, he goes off stage, and you can never shake his hand or say thank you or whatever. It's like he's in the green room beforehand, he's in the green room after, and he doesn't want to engage. I think we've developed a celebrity culture that is in the church. And so if people are saying to me, look, I think maybe I need to watch myself, I say, well, look, are you the celebrity? Are you the one who just goes and hides in the green room and people serve you and they take care of you and you have everything you want to eat and stuff like that? Or are you somebody who will actually get off stage, shake hands with people and stay there and minister to people and do stuff like that?
Yeah.
So, I've got friends like, Dr. Michael Maiden, an amazing guy in Phoenix, Arizona, ministering to countless numbers of broken people. And every time he finishes a sermon, Michael goes into a tent and he meets every new person personally. And he stays for an hour after church. He'll prophesy over them, talk to them, just minister to them. And to me, it's like, wow, you get it.
Yeah.
And there are others who are like, off stage in the green room into their car,
right,
yeah,
and it's like, man.
I remember you sharing a story, actually being really impressed with Joel Osteen as well. Like he will meet people and take time as well, whatever you feel about his theology.
Yeah, just to be real honest here,
it's
like
sad. It's sad that we have to say that, right? In our church world. Like, no matter what we have theology.
Because some people,
I know.
Does he agree with him? Like,
but that's not the point, guys.
Right. Yes, not at all.
Well, my wife wanted to go see him. I wasn't bothered.
Sure.
She wanted to see him. And I was amazed. I actually sat in this service. The worship was fantastic. His wife came out and preached for like 20 minutes. And I thought, oh, that's it. It's not him. And then he came out and preached for 40 minutes. And, Joel's one of those brilliant guys. And I never realized how his team edit him. Like, he makes mistakes. And I loved it. Well, you know what? I just forgot where I was. I'm going to go back and read my notes right now, and we'll pick it up again. He walks behind the pulpit. There we go. Off. Okay. And then he goes off again. He did it 3 times while I was there. 3 times.
See, you never see that, right?
You never see that. And then when he prayed for the sick, people came down the front. People were falling down.
Awesome.
There was stuff going on. I thought, wow, I've never seen any of that.
Wow.
And so you can make these judgments, superficial judgments. Yeah. And then afterwards we got to meet him, and he I was a first-time visitor. So he met all the first-time visitors. And we found out I was a pastor. He spent a little bit more time with us. But just engaging, helpful, blessing us. And so
that's awesome.
We can get images of people, but then we need to see, well, what are they really like when you meet them? What are they like in action? And the other thing, just to answer your question, is, how do your team feel about you?
John, how do you feel about me?
How accessible are you to them? And to what degree do you let them speak into your life? Or you, the exalted, anointed one, that you better not challenge them? And I know one leader, where people just could not have access to him to rebuke him or to help him in any way. He would turn around and say, you're out of your lane, get back in your lane. That's not for you to do. And it's like, well, then the question, well, whose job is it then?
Yeah.
If it's not those who know you best and work with you closest.
Yeah, PR does that for me. Like, he had full access. He was my youth pastor, so he has full access to come into my office and say whatever he wants to say to me. If he sees something that's out of a line, or I need to step it up in an area, and he has, I trust him fully.
Yeah, to me, part of good governance is that you have people around you who can speak the truth to you without you getting offended or defensive or thinking that somehow they're trying to get one over on you.
Yeah,
and to me, contrition, this humility before God, gives you an openness to hear that kind of thing.
Yeah, you got to trust, right? You have to trust the people that you have around you, and I think sometimes it can really mess if you're an insecure person. You're never going to want feedback.
No.
it's just it's a crushing, damning thing for you if you're an insecure leader.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just can't, and you're not going to grow from it,
And eventually you'll lose your voice. There's been several times, but two I can think of. Once was with Pete, actually, and the other was with Mark Elmendorp, who's a good friend of mine in Brisbane. And with no fear of being shamed, with no fear of, hey, you're going to lose your place with us, nothing like that. Just out of pure love and friendship, Mark said, look, first of all, I know what you mean when you say this. I want to be clear about that. And I think that is helpful. However, there are certain cultures or certain places that if you say it that way, they're going to hear this. So I want to help you avoid that pain. And I'm actually willing to sit here and help you brainstorm with a way to say the same thing, but in a different way, so that you avoid unnecessary sort of thing. And so if I would have heard, oh, you don't like me, you don't hear what I'm saying. But now, to be fair, his tone, and Pete did that with me once as well, with something that I had lightheartedly made fun of. But in their culture, it could have possibly been taken in a way I would have never meant it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so, that keeping that contrite heart, that teachable spirit, where, and especially people who are have been around more than you, and especially people who've been around more than you in specific cultures, for them to go, hey, you're saying this, I get it because I know you, but this one specific group of people are going to hear this, and I want to avoid all of their anger on you. And just being open to hear that.
You think about Jeroboam. So you've got Solomon, who sins, and then God says, okay, the king's going to be divided, but not in your lifetime. So his son Rehoboam comes to the throne, and Jeroboam is a strong character and leader under Solomon. So Rehoboam comes to the throne, and the people come to him and say, hey, your dad, the taxation was just too much for us. Can you just make it easier? And he goes, give me a couple of days. So he goes to all the wise counselor who've been with Solomon and say, hey, these people are right, just ease up now, and they will serve you and love you. Your kingdom will be great. And then the young guys who he's grown up with say, man, you need to show him who's boss. You need to take control here. You should not let these people push you around. And he comes up and he says, my little finger is going to be heavier than anything you got from my father. And boom, the people go, Israel, we're out of here. And the kingdom is divided. And then you get this prophet who comes along to Jeroboam, and he takes off his garment. He says, I want you to turn my garment into 12 pieces. Jeroboam does it, and he gives him 10 pieces. He says, the Lord is giving you 10 tribes, but for the sake of David and his covenant with David, two will stay with Rehoboam, and then Rehoboam gets angry, he wants to go to war, and then God comes with another prophet, says, no, you can't fight, you can't. This is how it has to be. So here's Jeroboam. He's been appointed by God to lead the 10 tribes of Israel. And then he does the dumbest thing you could ever imagine as a leader. He says, well, hang on a minute. There's going to be Passover soon. There's going to be Day of Atonement. There's going to be all these things where everyone's going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to lose control. They're going to go back. I need to set up worship somewhere outside of Jerusalem. So he sets up the two golden calves, one in the north, one in the south. Prophet comes to him, he says, the Lord would have established your kingdom forever if you hadn't have done this.
Yeah.
That's exactly the promise given to David. Exactly the same promise. So this guy, it's like he thinks this thing that's given by God to him as a stewardship, he thinks, now it's mine. I have to control it. It's the power crazy stuff. He puts Israel into idolatry. And the irony of the whole thing is that God was more than willing to let his dynasty continue in the same way David's did. He was willing to do that. And to me, that's a prime example of people just going, not realizing that the blessing of leadership is something that is a gift from God. It's a stewardship you're responsible for. And it isn't really about you, in the sense of you hanging on to it. It's about you fulfilling that stewardship and then passing it on to whoever.
Yeah, don't you find when you come into a leadership position like that, especially if you're a lead pastor, you're over an organization, you're the president, CEO, whatever, that there's moments where you wrestle with that part being over the top, like, because you're trying to, not only are you trying to maybe establish your leadership, quote unquote, you're trying to establish your footprint, so I think for me personally, it was, when Dad handed the church over to me, whatever, it was, I probably did a few things that were so the opposite of his leadership that it just not created an awkward moment, but it just didn't feel right. You know what I'm saying? Because just stepping into that role, stepping into that moment, and I think that could have came across as very harsh, and just kind of the hard line side of things. But again, I just feel like if you just keep your heart open to God and what He wants to do in your life, I think He kind of helps you realign that part as well.
When Jesus was hard, really, the only time He was hard is when marginalized people were being unjustly oppressed. He's hard on that stuff. Go away and learn what this means. I'll have mercy and not sacrifice, because He's eating with publicans and sinners. And then He's hard when the mission of God, the vision of God, is about to be compromised in some way. Jesus is hard on that stuff.
Yeah.
He will not let that happen.
Yeah.
Get behind me, Satan. Yeah. You are an offense to me. You savor the things of men and not the things of God.
Yeah.
You will not get in the way of the destiny and purpose for why I'm here. It's boom. And it's, and we read that, it's like, that's a little harsh on Peter, isn't it? I mean, did he have to use that word? But it kind of makes a point. And then Jesus is hard when somehow people are losing their way and they need to be reminded where they need to be going. And so no man putting his hand to the plow, looking back is worthy of the kingdom. And so there's specific contexts where Jesus is hard, but most of the time He's actually He's really compassionate. And I talk about compassion, contrition, how you are for people, how you are for God, but then connection, which is what you do to engage with people. And that we're all built for connection. It's not good for man to be alone. And so, if you've got good connection and you're humble, then when you're over on this side going too far, somebody's going to say something to you. And if you're humble enough, you'll listen to them if it's strong enough. And so, in connection, I talk about Jonathan and David and their connection. Talk about Paul and Barnabas, Jesus and the disciples, they're all connected in some way. Not that there isn't tension in all of that, but that God has a way of refining us through that connection as iron sharpens. I mean, this always happens when I'm with you. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. And you'll say some things, and I'm thinking to myself, I need to talk to Shane about that, because it just provokes me. And I wonder if Shane, I wonder if he sees that as a hybrid thing, or does he see, no, it's just that. And, I want to talk to you so often, but it's so good for me because I'm used to thinking in a particular way often, but when I'm connected to other people who think differently and bring a different perspective, I just feel so enlarged as a leader, rather than, well, this is what the Bible says, Shane.
Right.
Or worse, like the sarcasm of, have you ever even read your scripture?
Yeah.
No, I don't take it seriously at all. I've only given my life to studying it and communicating.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a key thing. You see it as something that enlarges you and not something that threatens the fundamental way you see things.
Yeah.
And so insecure people feel threatened when that kind of thing. And then you get phrases like that.
Yeah.
Like, do you even read your Bible?
It's just totally unhelpful. Like one of the things I'm picking up from this is too, that I find profound, is the book and the truths in the book and the way Pete carries himself, because I know him personally, is it is a resistance of the temptation to think about leadership in a dichotomy.
Yeah.
You're either hard or soft. Well, or which one's right? Hard or soft, Larry?
Right.
Which like as if it's an egg, right?
Right.
Like wait a minute, hold on.
Well, the mercy people in the room would say soft, and then the CEOs would say hard.
And you know, Pete makes a good point. Like you think about when Jesus was hard. Like the only time Jesus ever said someone went to hell was a rich man overlooking a poor man. Again, an oppressed person being unjustly oppressed. I mean, remember that one guy comes to him and says, Jesus, my brother's not being fair with the inheritance, you know? And you gotta understand, first century Galilee, if you're not familiar with history, if you were part of a family that had an inheritance to speak of, like you weren't living day to day, just trying to survive that day, you were really rich. and this guy says, he's not being fair with the inheritance. And Jesus goes, what's that got to do with me? Like, what's wrong with you? It's not even in my purview to make judicial arguments. I can question your heart about how much you're putting faith in your things. And he does this Jewish parable thing where he answers the guy's dilemma with a parable, and he's supposed to find himself in the parable. And then he does this rabbi kung fu, and it's the only time I know that he ever does it, where like most parables are, there's 4 kinds of ground, there's 3 people who show up, there's this kind of thing, right? Jesus is like, this parable only has 1 guy, and he's a fool. Right? so there's no one else for this guy to choose from, right? He's like, oh no. And he built barns, and then he thought, well, I got so much and there's so much need. What do I do? I'm gonna build bigger barns. Yeah. And then Jesus ends his parable like, I'm gonna kill you. Which, as far as I know, is the only time Jesus is like, tonight you die, right? And so you think about his hard side. Sheep and goats, pretty direct and hard.
Oh, man.
Matthew 25, like away from like sheep and goats. Rich man and Lazarus. The foolish barn builder. Those are hard. But then
the rock and the sand. The houses.
Yeah. You know? Which one? Yeah. And then there's the oh man, you denied me 3 times. I'm gonna cook breakfast on the beach for you.
Yes.
Because I'd rather eat with you in peace than bring up your failure. Yeah. And there's that. So there's the tension in the middle is wisdom. And I was just sitting here taking all this in. One of the things that I picked up that I think is worth saying is whether the situation calls for the hard side or whether the situation calls for the easy side, contrition, humility, and no leader, hard or soft, has ever impacted their world if they entirely took their cues from public opinion. Totally. Right? So that's that conviction part.
It is.
Yeah. And that is, for anybody listening, I get how incredibly difficult that is, because as much as I love the internet, where I can watch full HD sports around the world, the internet has given unqualified people a microphone that they likely shouldn't have. And I remember Bill Clinton was being interviewed by a pastor at a pastor's meeting. Like, this pastor somehow scored Bill Clinton.
It's pretty good, man.
I think just after he was president of the United States.
Wow.
And he got to ask him a question about his process around decision making. And Bill Clinton said, one of the things you got to remember is that the only people you got to consider is your wise counsel who have all the information. And he talked about a specific situation in the White House where he had to make a decision, and he said it was an easy decision. But the critics only had half the information because the other half was classified. And he said we couldn't let them in on the classified information, but if they'd had all the information, it was easy. And he talked about having the conviction to do the right thing in the face of public criticism while understanding they know not what they do. Like we got to forgive them because they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And and so I think that to avoid the dumb dichotomy of, well, am I going to be soft or hard for the rest of my? Well, sometimes that is called for, and sometimes flip, man, just putting your arm around somebody.
Yeah.
Particularly if they've done something that potentially has destroyed themselves.
Yeah.
Almost never do they need you to tell them how dumb they were.
Yeah.
They already are feeling it, living it, and it's worse than you could ever imagine. And to pile on at that point, and that's one thing you never see Jesus do.
Yeah.
You never see Jesus in a problem going, well, I'm going to just pile on here.
Yeah. And this book is an appeal to live an integrated life.
Yeah.
Yes.
With both sides fully integrated into your life, growing in both. Not to say, I'm just the visionary. That's why I just tell it like it is. Everything's black and white. Yeah, you just let yourself off from maturing.
Yes.
Based on your
great.
gifting and based on how you see yourself, your self-perception, stop being such an idiot, and just start having a little bit of compassion, a little bit of connection with people.
That's part of the problem with these personality tests.
Yeah.
Is personality, understanding yourself is awesome unless it becomes the crutch. Right. I'm not a jerk. I'm just prophetic.
Yeah. No, you're both.
It's like, are those right? Or I'm a 7. I can't help it.
Yeah.
I can't help that I just treated you that way. I'm a 7, right? That's an Enneagram reference, right? So, that you did. I'm just saying, there's cameras rolling,
or the disc profile, and
Right.
I'm just a high D.
I'm a high D.
I'm a high D. So. We all know what that stands for.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Or you ask someone to have some internal strength and really draw a line. And you're like, oh, I'm an S.
Yeah.
I'm just a servant.
I'm just a servant. Yeah.
And so we take a quest for personal understanding, which is helpful.
That's good.
And then could potentially use it as a crutch to justify things that totally sabotage our growth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like my bent in my
way to
personality profile is I bend. So my weakness and darkness and disrepair is people pleasing. And if I think through my life, my desire for someone to like me has at times I chose to behave a certain way so that they would like me. And it ended up causing more problems than not because I was not authentic in that behavior. I just really was looking for approval. And so part of my journey has been dealing with that. I'm still dealing with that. No one ever fully deals with their desire to be liked, but I can either deal with it or I can go, I'm a high I. The disc, I'm a high I. That makes me a great communicator, but I really need it, and it becomes that.
Yeah. The final chapter of clarity is when I wrote that, because for me, clarity is an ability to see the way ahead, to know what the next steps are. And funny enough, I picked up in my book, I talk about what you talked about earlier today with the staff, which is begin the Simon Sinek, begin with why. Start there. Work with why, then what, then how, and then who. And try and get clarity on all those things, but get clarity on the why. Think hard. What is our mission? What are we here for? What am I responsible for? And work through that process and cascade it then. And then you get a real sense, well, this is who we are. And sometimes people have come to our church and they say, oh, we think you should be doing this. And I say, that's great, but that's not us. I can point you to somebody who's doing that.
Right.
And
it's so great to have that, though, your why defined.
It is, because in my early days, I would just say, oh, we should be doing that. Yeah, maybe we should, And it was,
right.
It's like I was going off in 6 different directions, trying to keep it growing. It was chaos. And it was because I was trying to be good-hearted and trying to embrace everybody. But rather than asking the question, well, what is it I'm here to do? And even Jesus choosing the 12, we talked about this yesterday, he had about 100 disciples he could choose from. And he chooses 2 sets of brothers, and he chooses a twin, but not the other twin. And it's like, if today he couldn't get, if you have a woke culture, you can't do that, Jesus. There's just too many one-sided families here, and 40% of them is fishermen. I mean,
and 100% are men.
Yes, all of that.
That'd be a problem today.
Yeah, all of that. But when you've got clarity, this is my why. This is why I'm doing this. I think that becomes...
I think a good way to say that is that a mature no is always driven by a yes, that your yes has to declare. So if you're going to be a yes person on a certain culture, a yes person on a certain disposition towards financial management, a yes person on this, it requires 100 no's here, right? So a yes person on fitness, like it's not enough to go, I'm just not going to eat donuts and da-da-da-da. It's wait a minute, hang on. I'm a yes person on fitness, and that yes actually is the driving thing behind all the things I must say no to. And it's not a matter of right or wrong. There's a lot of things that aren't wrong, but they're not wise. They're not useful. They don't get us where we're going. I mean, this was a very simple example, but this happened in the last, probably in the last 6 months, because the world opened back up. And, this 20-year-old with his parents there said, I'm thinking about, taking 6 months and going and walking around Europe. And I said, why? He goes, well, is there anything wrong with it? I was like, well, no, but what's your goal? And does that get you to a yes? And if it does, fine. But if your yes is to get your training for your career, that's just going to say, like, it's not wrong. It's just...
It's a distraction.
It's a distraction. And particularly 6 months walking around Europe, I'm thinking I'm safely into the $15,000, $20,000 cost range. And then, he's 20. $20,000 invested at 20 till you're 65 is 1.1 million. Like, I hope you like the trip. So it's not wrong. It's just, wait a minute, there's a yes, and you will not have anxiety, and you won't have depression, and you won't have sadness as long as your actions and your intentional yes match. It's when your actions and your intentional yes cross or go opposite, and you're going to have that. And so it's a matter of the way you're saying it. I love it. It's the clarity, or your most intentional yes has to be the defining things of all the things you say no to.
See, I wish I'd written that. That's really good.
Thank you.
It is good.
In the Revised Edition.
Well, the way Jesus said it is, broad is the road, narrow is the way. And once again, Western people read that as heaven or hell. It's not talking about heaven or hell. That is as an old rabbinical teaching on how the most successful people who find life are intentional about the road they take. Because
it's like Robert Frost, the road less traveled.
Yes. That most people try to let life just happen by accident, and it ends up hurting them. The people who actually find life, they're on that narrow way.
And here's the thing about clarity. When Jesus says, take up your cross, deny yourself, follow me, is there anything attractive about that statement, really, unless you have clarity of what that will bring you? Because the whole thing about delayed gratification, it's all about clarity of what's ahead, that enables me to go through something painful now, or something that's in the area of self-denial. Because if you keep your life, you'll lose it. Yes. But if you lose your life for my sake, you'll find it.
There's this profound. I don't even know where people find the time to do this, but the University of Washington did this study, and it was a longitudinal study, which means they took the same amount of people and studied them over, and in this case was 35 years. And what they wanted to study was does a person's ability at 5 to delay gratification have any implications to when they were 35?
I read that study.
And
it's brilliant.
Right. And they for those listening, they just put 5-year-olds in a room, and there was no consequences. They put a cookie down, and if they could wait 10 minutes, they would get 3 cookies. If they couldn't wait 10 minutes, there was no punishment. There was just...
It just had the one cookie.
No more cookies.
Yeah.
And so then they just observe their behavior, and some of them are smelling it, and some of them are licking it because it's technically not eating it, and eventually
I love that.
And then eventually there was a group of them that ate the cookie, obviously, and then there was a group of them that didn't. And after 10 minutes, they came in and no punishment, no scolding. Oh, here's your 3 cookies, and okay, you ate your cookie. And what they found is over the course of 2 weeks was that the kids who ate it on day 1, on day 2 they ate it faster, and then by the end they were just in it. Oh, thank you, And then the ones who resisted on day 1 found it easier to resist all the way through, and they found this unbelievably statistically significant connection between somebody's ability to delay gratification at 5 and their ability to delay it at 35, and what that then brought. At 5, it's 3 cookies. At 35, it's a savings account. It's limiting your debt load so that you're not enslaved to MasterCard.
Yeah.
It's that, and that comes down to clarity.
Yeah, it does.
And it's a profound thing.
Yeah, who for the joy set before him endured the cross.
Endured it.
And despised the shame. In other words, anyone who died on a cross, that was shameful. Well, Jesus looked at that and said, yeah, not going to let that touch me. He despised it. I'm going to go through that because that will produce that.
Man, yeah.
That's unbelievable clarity.
Yeah. That's very good clarity.
Yeah.
And that's a real leader's gift, isn't it? I remember you always teaching, you look for leaders with insight and foresight. What's going on right now, but how do I get to the next stage?
Yeah.
And if you're lacking in clarity, you're lacking in the key element leaders need to take people somewhere. Where is this headed specifically?
And I love that the joy set before. Like I've got really good friends. They're close personal friends of mine, and they're really successful today. But I've known them since 1995, and they were so committed to not having debt that when they were young in their married life, they both wanted their master's degrees. So what the one worked a second job while his wife got her master's degree, and then she worked a second job while he got his. And then the money from the second job paid for their both. So they're both like master's degree educated people, and they did it debt free. And today they're both incredibly successful in the living. And then somebody, this was a while back now, they said, "Oh man, look at you, you're so lucky," And it's like, hold on, who works a full time? Who works till 3 o'clock and then gets off and works from 5 to 10 to pay for their spouse's master's degree, and then does it in verse? Those are people who knew where they were going, had the clarity to endure whatever that was in order to reach a goal. And I just would applaud anything, and it's. But you're right. The joy of the goal set before you has to overcome the temptation to instantly gratify.
Yeah. Sometimes, I think it's in my book, but sometimes people want to know, what do people of faith look like? And one of the things I look for is, who's persevering? Because the person who's persevering, particularly during a trial, during something that's difficult, they're seeing something. If they're hanging in there, they're seeing something.
Right.
They're not just putting up with it, and especially if their disposition is good.
There was
what I mean by not the complainers and moaners like the children of Israel, but this is hard, but
this is into Angela Duckworth's book
as
well, Grit, which is a phenomenal study, and she's a genius. And I won't bore you for the next 10 minutes explaining it. Just go read the book.
And if you can't read the book, watch the 15-minute TED Talk.
Yeah.
Because it's brilliant.
And then go buy the book.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. So what do you tend to see more of, wimps or megalomaniacs?
It depends which country I'm in.
Oh, really?
That's interesting. Culturally,
So culturally, I think America has more megalomaniacs.
Woo! Come on.
Culturally, in Europe, we have more wimps, way more wimps. Which is why I think Europe is so attracted to stuff that comes out of America. And, I have to say, America has this phenomenal entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Which I'm just full of admiration for. The can-do attitude. I mean, I was discipled by Americans, and I think, in my early years, for 7 years, I was discipled by an amazing American. And he just kicked cynicism out of me, which is deeply rooted in British and European culture.
Yeah.
Deeply rooted. It's just, I learned to have a can-do attitude. But I've noticed, in different cultures. So in Germany, there's a neurosis about about strong leadership.
Yeah, given the
Well,
history.
how long?
I mean,
You know, so sometimes people, I think I say this in the introduction to my book. People come up to me and say, "You're a strong leader," and it depends who's saying it. If an American says that to me, he's paying me a compliment. If a German says that to me, he's usually scared. And if a Swiss person says to me, it's like, "We could never do what you do." It's so highly democratized, and so different cultures,
interesting,
have different weaknesses.
Yeah, right.
I think, and we can learn from that. But the thesis of this book is, if we look at Jesus, it was perfectly blended, and at least, despite our personality, our proclivity, our preference, even, we can move more towards being like Jesus. I mean, Paul talks about being conformed to the image of Christ. He talks about, in Romans 12, about having your mind renewed, the metamorphosis, the transformation through the renewing of the mind, Ephesians 4. If we commit to that process, I believe we can be more holistic in our leadership and at least be on the journey, knowing our personal biases. And while we're still on the journey, have a team of people around you who perhaps compensate for that while still on the journey.
That's great. That's good.
That's good.
Thanks so much for sharing that today. Thanks for your insight on that.
You're so welcome.
And thanks for that prophetic moment too. I enjoyed that.
Did you?
Maybe not. I'm just glad I'm not on the harder side of things at times. Yeah.
Totally. Well, but I hope you did enjoy it. Make sure you like and comment. That helps us spread this word. Share it. Send it to people. And we have a few more podcasts coming up over the next couple of weeks with these guys. So you've got some good stuff to look forward to.
It's going to be awesome. And we just hope that in some way today, this enriched your life.